This is a reaction to an interview Sagar and Jetty gave at the Lex Friedman podcast, and it's about the impact of DOGE on government finance and generally on the markets. It's also a reaction to Cathie Wood's analysis of the macro environment in the US, in particular her expectation that under the Trump administration in the first 2 years, I believe, we should expect 3% deficits. Now, we are of the opinion that DOGE, led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, actually will have a much bigger impact, and that we can see budget surpluses in the next in the next years, and that we have an opportunity here, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to even outpace what happened under the Clinton administration. We will contrast what happened there with today, because back then the bond market was a constraint. Today it's not. So back then there was actually a budget constraint versus today we don't have a budget constraint. So the only way we can actually reduce our wasteful government spending and also increase efficiency in the economy is by our decision as people to do it. So we don't have a constraint, a hard constraint at least, and that's why we believe that this movement under Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to fix the government waste is a much bigger deal than people expect. For example, we believe that it will have large impacts on defense spending, on the healthcare spending, and also on academia. And that will foster innovation, and it will foster wealth creation, which will eventually also lead to a reduction of the deficit and lead to a surplus, because we will have much higher economic growth. Now, to be fair to Cathie Wood, she does expect that. She does expect higher real economic growth, but she also expects budget deficits. And the reason these budget deficits are expected, whether it's Engetti or Cathie Wood or most commentators on Wall Street and Washington, D.C., they all look at the budget, which is fair. They look at the budget, they look at the entitlement spending, and they say, look, you can't cut this, you can't cut that, so there's no way we can reduce that. And it's our belief that, yes, it can be done. It will require some maybe a little uncomfortable measures by Donald Trump, because we might have to overrule some decisions that come from Congress. And the reason we might have to do that is because Congress is the problem here. If we boil this down to who is the problem, well, Congress is the one that is deciding how much money is going to be spent. So they are the problem. And if we ask them to reduce the spending, well, they increased in the first place. So therefore, we need to find ways to circumvent them. So, but there's two vectors that DOGE can be more effective. One vector is by reducing the spending, and the other vector is by changing procurement. This is not even on podcast. It's December 12, 2024. This is Krim Telco. For the year, we're up 95%. The market's up roughly 26%. We're outperforming by 69%. We had a massive increase in the Tesla stock recently, driven by a couple of events. I would say mainly the release of FSD 13, which I think is showing to everybody that Tesla is ready for a robotaxi, which has led to the second important event, which is that GM pulled Cruise and therefore admits that this teleoperated semi-AI type robotaxi situation is not competitive with Tesla. Google is not giving up yet. But Waymo is in the same boat, and I think that it's only a matter of time until that will happen. So basically, Tesla's path towards dominating transportation, robotic transportation, is paved by the technology which is available, and also market reaction is reflecting. I think third, also we have euphoria in the market, which is justified. And this is the segue to this particular episode. We believe that the cut in waste that is possible and desired by DOGE, which is the Department of Government Efficiency led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, is being underestimated. And what we mean with that is, first, the numbers themselves. So people expect very little actual cuts in deficits because there's high entitlement spending. We want to refute that. Second, people think that Senate and Congress in general will block most spending because of the incentive structure. We will refute that. And third, we also believe that actually there's a large overlap of waste from the government in the private sector. And we believe that this, by cutting, so by succeeding in the first two, on the first two fronts, which is again cut spending and also reduce resistance from Congress, we can also see massive improvements in efficiency in the private sector, which will drive real economic growth. We believe that we can have budget surpluses already in the year one under Trump. We believe that he has an incentive to do that for various reasons. But most importantly, if he should succeed, then we will have real economic growth. And real economic growth is driven by innovation and by lack of corruption, because real economic growth is there's two variables here. One is innovation and real products and services, and the other is inflation. And if you cut waste, you reduce inflation, which drives up real economic growth. So let me talk about number one. We can't cut spending. We want to refute that argument. We can't cut spending because it's enshrined in entitlement spending. You can't cut it. Well, yes, you can. You can cut it by two ways. One is you can change procurement, which is what Andretti also suggests. So we believe that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit in not changing the services, but just cutting the spending on the DOD and the Medicare side of things. So, for example, if you go to a hospital now, a Band-Aid in the hospital costs $6, a Band-Aid in Walgreens costs 60 cents. So things like that are, in my opinion, unacceptable and should be changed and can be changed. And DOGE is, DOGE in our opinion, is going to tackle these types of problems. This is something that Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. Musk has already seen through, let's say, his operations with SpaceX, and also Vivek has seen in his work on healthcare. I think the second thing that can be done is that Congress actually can be strongmanned into changing its behavior. Now, I think Congress is not just part of the solution here, but Congress is also the problem. And because Congress is the problem, we shouldn't be asking Congress to solve the problem. In other words, Congress should be strongmanned or handheld, or whatever the word is, into actually adjusting its spending, because they've been the ones who were doing these deficits. Now, I don't know exactly how this can happen, but in the Andretti interview, there's a couple of episodes, couple of passages where he talks about, let's say, after wars, we were able to change institutions in the United States. Also after 9/11, let's say, we introduced the Department of Homeland Security. So there are ways to change institutions. And I think we are actually in a crisis here. We are in a financial crisis, we're in a fiscal crisis. We are also actually in a situation where we had a war. The war wasn't fought on battlefields with tanks and soldiers. The war was fought, it was the woke virus and COVID that was trying to overthrow the institution of the United States. And we fought that war back through an election. It wasn't violent. And hopefully we can continue like this. But we are in a very dire situation, because what the woke and COVIDians have done is spend trillions and trillions of dollars that they don't have, our money, our future generations' money, on wasteful, corrupt projects. And that needs to be reversed, and that's why we have DOGE, and that's why Trump was elected, or partly that's why Trump was elected. So how can this be done? Well, there's a couple of ideas. For example, we could make, first we need to put term limits for Congress. I think Trump has already mentioned that. We also need to put spending limits on Congress. So Congress has the authority to approve spending, but it has to also be constrained, hard constrained, in not overspending. Now, putting this all together, of course, is very complex, but I think what I'm getting at is that the complexity of DC cannot be used as a reason for why we can't fix DC, because that's a tautology. And the way we cut the complexity of DC is by cutting the complexity. And the bad news is that probably for a while, we might need to reduce our reliance on checks and balances and democracy. And that's unfortunate, but it happened under FDR, it happened under Adam Grant. So whenever we had President, or even Lincoln, whenever we had really dramatic situations in the United States, we had to curb sometimes explicitly and sometimes just implicitly democracy to fix the problem. And I think this is one of those situations. We have very good people in place, whether it's Musk and Rasmani, whether it's the Haskett in the Defense Department, Tulsi Patel in FBI. There are people who have a clear mandate and a clear desire to fix the corruption and the waste in the government. I think the third thing I want to mention is the opportunity, also the spillover of this wasteful government behavior on the private sector. There's so many companies, particularly on Wall Street and also in the healthcare sector, that we call them, the managerial class, the paper pushers. They all have these kind of nicknames, and maybe it sounds a bit derogatory, but in the end, they're all very wasteful companies in the private sector. You have private equity companies like TPG or Blackstone, and then the investment companies like BlackRock, who really are doing nothing other than wasting money that is already being wasted by the government. There's a multiplier effect of waste. There's probably an economic theory for this that I'm not aware of, but if the government wastes $1 on a useless project, then that gets multiplied by 5 or 10x in the real economy. You have people who consult for some projects that are funded by the company. You have grants, for example, look at the universities, lots of university grants for useless types of projects, sometimes also politically activated projects, things along those lines. All of this can be also cut if we cut the government. The government is the source of taxing, the source of taxation, the source of waste, the source of inefficiency. And by cutting the waste in the government and realigning government with the incentive of its citizens to serve us, I think we can achieve a lot more than just a budget surplus. We can achieve real economic growth. To summarize, 3 vectors that we believe the Trump administration, in particular DOGE, can be effective. One is by reducing actual services and waste in the government. Number 2, and also doing that by actual services and by changing procurement. Actually, the procurement is the main factor, which is where the corruption happens. Number 2, that Congress, in particular, and other institutions can be changed. Maybe we need to forego a little bit of democracy for a while, but we can do it and we must do it because Congress has been the problem in the spending. And therefore, we must change it, for example, put term limits and spending limits on Congress. And that has to come from the executive branch, which under Trump has a mandate by the people of the United States to fix this mess in the government. And third, we believe that one thing that people underestimate, most people not, let's say Kathy Wood mentions that, but we think that there's also a massive spillover effect of waste into the real economy. So vice versa, if we cut the waste in the government, we could also have a massive positive spillover effect into real growth. And this is partly why we believe that innovation and real growth in the next couple of years will be very strong. And that explains why the financial markets are so euphoric. Thank you.